The diplomatic warning. The crystalline spires of the Solarian Council gleamed under the light of 3 artificial suns, a testament to the technological prowess of its founding species. Ambassador Elena Martinez stood at the entrance of the Grand Chamber, her simple gray diplomatic uniform a stark contrast to the elaborate ceremonial garments worn by other galactic representatives. She carried herself with the quiet confidence that many mistook for naivety. The year was 3287, and humanity had been part of the Galactic Confederation for barely 2 decades. To the ancient civilizations that had traversed the stars for millennia, humans were still considered newcomers, interesting specimens from a resource-rich, but otherwise unremarkable world. The Solarian Council recognizes Ambassador Martinez of Terra, announced the Syntherian moderator, its bioluminescent tendrils pulsing with each word. Elena approached the central podium, her footsteps echoing in the vast chamber. Representatives from over 100 species watched with varying degrees of interest or indifference. The Centauri delegation, occupying the upper tier with their characteristic arrogance, barely glanced in her direction. Honored members of the council, Elena began, her voice steady and clear. I come before you today with a message of both warning and hope. The territorial disputes along the Orion Spur have reached a critical point. A ripple of dismissive amusement passed through the chamber. The Centauri High Chancellor, Verathix Prime, rose from his seat, his 4 arms gesturing dramatically. The human delegation speaks of critical points as if they understand the complexity of galactic politics. Your species has barely mastered warp travel. Elena's expression remained unchanged. High Chancellor, with respect, we've observed the increasing militarization of the border regions. Your fleets have been moving into contested space, establishing forward bases within striking distance of several colonies. Military exercises, Verathix dismissed with a wave. Nothing that concerns primitive species like yours. The human ambassador took a deep breath. Chancellor, I must deliver our formal position. Please don't make us mad. We ask for peaceful resolution, but we will defend ourselves if necessary. Laughter erupted throughout the chamber. The Centauri delegation found this particularly amusing, their crystalline bodies resonating with mirth. Even some of humanity's allies seemed embarrassed by the simple, almost childlike warning. Don't make us mad. Verathix mimicked, his tone dripping with condescension. Is that how the mighty humans conduct diplomacy? With playground threats? Elena waited for the laughter to subside. It's not a threat, Chancellor. It's a plea for restraint. Human history has taught us the terrible cost of unchecked aggression. We've learned from our mistakes, and we hope others can learn from them too without experiencing the same consequences. The council session continued for hours, with various species debating border rights and resource allocation. Throughout it all, Elena repeated her warning whenever the opportunity arose, always polite, always restrained. The other delegates continued to find it amusing. 3 weeks later, the first reports reached the Solarian Council. Border colonies along the disputed territories were experiencing strange technical difficulties. Ships passing through certain regions reported navigation failures, communication blackouts, and unexplained power drains. At first, the incidents were dismissed as natural phenomena, perhaps some new form of spatial anomaly. The Centauri, confident in their technological superiority, continued their expansion plans. They established 3 new military outposts in contested space, each capable of projecting force across multiple star systems. Elena requested another emergency session. This time, her warning was more direct. The Centauri Collective has ignored our diplomatic overtures, she stated, standing once again at the central podium. We've tried to resolve this peacefully. We've asked repeatedly not to be pushed into conflict. Please, I implore you one final time. Don't make us mad. Verathix Prime responded with open contempt. The Centauri Collective does not bow to the whims of infant species. Your anger concerns us as much as the tantrum of a child. The chamber's atmosphere had shifted slightly. Some of the older species, Those who had witnessed humanity's rapid technological advancement seemed less amused. They remembered how quickly humans had gone from chemical rockets to quantum drives, from radio waves to subspace communication. But the Centauri remained unmoved. Their civilization had dominated their sector of space for 10,000 years. They had crushed dozens of species that dared oppose them. What could these newcomers possibly do? The answer came exactly 17 hours after the council session ended. Every Centauri ship within 100 light-years of the disputed territory suddenly lost propulsion. Not damaged, not destroyed, simply unable to move. Their weapons systems went offline. Life support continued functioning, but nothing else responded to commands. In the Centauri High Command, panic began to set in. Admiral Kraxthor, Supreme Commander of the border fleets, demanded answers from his scientists. "It's impossible," the lead researcher stammered. "Our systems show no damage, no interference, no external signals. It's as if the fundamental constants of physics have been altered in localized regions around our vessels." "That's absurd," Kraxthor snarled. "Find the weapon signature. Identify the attack vector." But there was nothing to find. No energy readings, no missile traces, no evidence of any conventional weapon. The ships simply stopped working. On Earth, in a facility buried beneath the Rocky Mountains, a team of quantum physicists monitored their handiwork. They had spent 2 decades developing technology that most species considered theoretical at best, impossible at worst. "Quantum field manipulation successful," reported Dr. Sarah Chen, lead scientist of Project Damocles. "All Centauri vessels in the target zone have been neutralized without loss of life." The president of United Earth, Marcus Okonkwo, nodded gravely. "Send the message." A transmission went out across all diplomatic channels. "The United Earth government regrets the necessity of this action. We have asked repeatedly for peaceful resolution. We have warned against aggression. This is not what we wanted, but it is what you have forced us to become. Please, even now, choose peace." The Centauri, their pride wounded but their forces intact, prepared for all-out war. They pulled ships from across their empire, assembling the largest fleet seen in a millennium. Surely, whatever trick the humans had used couldn't work against such overwhelming force. They were wrong. As the massive Centauri armada approached Earth space, reality itself seemed to rebel against them. Time flowed differently for each ship. Some experienced centuries in moments, their crews aging to dust in seconds. Others became trapped in temporal loops, living the same few seconds for what would effectively be eternity. The humans had weaponized quantum mechanics on a scale no one thought possible. They hadn't destroyed the Centauri fleet. They had removed it from conventional spacetime altogether. Back at the Solarian Council, representatives watched in stunned silence as humanity's true capabilities were revealed. The warnings suddenly made terrible sense. When humans said, "Please don't make us mad," they weren't making childish threats. They were desperately trying to avoid unleashing technologies that defy comprehension. Elena Martinez stood once more at the central podium, her expression somber. "We developed these capabilities out of necessity, not desire. Our homeworld was harsh, unforgiving. We faced extinction countless times. We learned that survival sometimes requires terrible choices." She paused, looking around the chamber. "But we also learned that with great power comes great responsibility. That's why we asked, why we begged, not to be pushed into using it. We know what we're capable of, and it terrifies us." The chamber remained silent. No one was laughing now. "The Centauri fleet has not been destroyed," Elena continued. "They exist in quantum stasis, outside normal spacetime. We can restore them, but only if they agree to peace. This is not vengeance. This is deterrence." High Chancellor Verethix Prime, his arrogance shattered, transmitted his unconditional surrender from his homeworld. The border disputes ended that day, not through negotiation or compromise, but through the stark realization that humanity's power was limited only by their reluctance to use it. In the weeks that followed, As the full scope of human capabilities became known, the phrase, "Please don't make us mad," took on new meaning throughout the galaxy. It wasn't a threat or a boast. It was a sincere plea from a species that had mastered powers they wished they'd never needed to develop. The universe had learned, too late for the Centauri, but perhaps in time for others, that human politeness wasn't weakness, it was restraint. And breaking that restraint revealed not warriors or conquerors, but a species that had looked into the abyss of their own potential and chose, whenever possible, to look away. The silent response. The Centauri Collective's military command buzzed with activity in the aftermath of their fleet's neutralization. They had never faced such a complete and inexplicable defeat. In the towering spires of the Central Command on Centauri Prime, emergency meetings stretched through multiple day cycles as the Empire's greatest minds struggled to comprehend what had happened. Grand Admiral Torvik Zan, newly appointed after Kraxthor's disgrace, reviewed the sensor data for the 100th time. "There must be a pattern," he muttered, his crystalline fingers tracing invisible lines through holographic displays. "Some energy signature, some quantum fluctuation. Anything that explains how they did this." His chief science officer, Dr. Vilex, shook her head. "Admiral, we've analyzed every known spectrum. The humans either use technology beyond our comprehension, or they've discovered entirely new physics." The Admiral's four eyes narrowed. "Then we adapt. We overcome. The Centauri have never been defeated by a lesser species, and we won't start now." He turned to his strategic planning team. "Prepare the reserve fleets. We'll overwhelm them with sheer numbers." Across the galaxy, human diplomatic channels remained open. Ambassador Elena Martinez continued to advocate for peace, even as Earth's military prepared for the inevitable escalation. What the Centauri didn't know, what no one outside Earth's highest security clearances knew, was that humanity's quantum weapons were just the beginning. Deep beneath the Pacific Ocean, in a facility known only as Site Omega, Dr. Sarah Chen briefed the United Earth Defense Council. "The Centauri are mobilizing their reserve fleets," she reported, gesturing to a star map showing countless red dots converging on human space. "They're pulling ships from every corner of their empire." "Will the quantum field manipulators work on such a large scale?" asked General Patricia Wong, Earth's supreme military commander. Dr. Chen hesitated. "The power requirements increase exponentially with scale. We might stop 90% of their forces, but the remainder would still outnumber us significantly." President Okonkwo leaned forward, his expression grave. "Then we moved to Phase 2. The room fell silent. Phase 2 had been theoretical, a last resort deemed too dangerous for anything but extinction-level threats. "Mr. President," Dr. Chen began carefully, "Phase 2 involves manipulating the fundamental structure of reality itself." "The risks." "I'm aware of the risks, Dr." Okonkwo interrupted. "But if we don't act, billions of humans across our colonies will die. We tried diplomacy. We demonstrated our capability. They've chosen to escalate. Now we must respond." As the Centauri Armada gathered at staging points throughout their empire, strange phenomena began to manifest. At first, they were subtle, chronometers running slightly fast or slow, navigation systems showing minute discrepancies, crew members experiencing mild disorientation. Then the effects intensified. On the battleship Crixer's Pride, Commander Thax reported seeing his reflection move independently in polished surfaces. Crew members swore they heard whispers in empty corridors, conversations that hadn't happened yet, or had happened years ago. "It's psychological warfare," Admiral Torvik declared during an emergency conference. "The humans are using some form of mass hallucination technology. Maintain discipline." But it wasn't hallucination. Humanity had learned to manipulate not just quantum fields, but the underlying fabric of space-time itself. They created localized reality distortions, regions where cause and effect became fluid, where the laws of physics bent just enough to induce chaos without causing outright destruction. The effects were precisely calculated to maximize psychological impact while minimizing actual harm. Humans had studied their own history of warfare and learned that breaking an enemy's will to fight was often more effective than destroying their capacity to fight. On the Centauri colony world of HFY, the governor watched in horror as his reflection in the governmental palace's crystal walls showed him aging rapidly, dying, decomposing, then reversing the process, all while he stood perfectly still. Throughout the city, similar temporal anomalies manifested, each carefully designed to demonstrate humanity's power without causing permanent damage. In deep space, Centauri patrol ships encountered regions where space itself seemed to fold inward, creating non-Euclidean geometries that defied comprehension. Vessels would enter these zones and emerge light years from their intended destinations, their crews experiencing anything from seconds to subjective years of travel time. The psychological toll was devastating. Centauri military discipline, built on 10 millennia of superiority, crumbled in the face of phenomena that challenged their understanding of reality. Crews refused to enter certain regions of space. Officers reported their subordinates for behaviors that hadn't happened yet. Entire battle groups turned on each other, convinced they were fighting human infiltrators. At Site Omega, Dr. Chen monitored the effects with growing unease. "We're walking a very fine line," she warned President Okonkwo during a secure briefing. "Each reality distortion risks creating permanent damage to the fabric of space-time." "But it's working," General Wang observed, studying reports of Centauri forces in disarray. "They're pulling back from the border regions. Some units are refusing orders entirely." The president nodded slowly. "Continue as planned, but prepare for diplomatic outreach. The moment they show willingness to negotiate, we cease all operations." The Centauri High Council convened an emergency session as reports of chaos flooded in from across their empire. High Chancellor Verithix Prime, his crystalline form showing stress fractures from constant anxiety, struggled to maintain order. "We face an enemy that fights without weapons," he announced to the assembled leadership. "They attack our minds, our perception of reality itself. How do we combat an opponent who turns the universe against us?" Elder Counselor Merix, one of the few who had advocated for peace from the beginning, spoke up. "Perhaps we don't combat them at all. The humans warned us. They begged us not to provoke them. Maybe it's time we listened." "Listen," General Torvik snarled. "The Centauri do not surrender to." His words cut off as the council chamber itself began to warp. The crystalline walls flowed like liquid, the ceiling rippled like water, and gravity seemed to shift randomly. Council members grabbed onto their seats as reality bent around them. Then, as suddenly as it began, everything returned to normal. In the center of the chamber stood a holographic projection of Ambassador Elena Martinez, High Chancellor, members of the Centauri Council. Her image spoke with calm authority. "This demonstration affects only your council chamber and will end momentarily. We want you to understand. We could do this to your entire civilization, but we choose not to." The council members stared in shocked silence as Elena continued. "Humanity developed these capabilities not for conquest, but for survival. We learned to manipulate reality itself because our very existence demanded it. But with this power came the understanding that it should never be used lightly." High Chancellor Verithix found his voice. "What do you want from us?" "Peace," Elena replied simply. "Withdraw your forces. Respect established borders. Engage in genuine diplomacy. That's all we've ever asked. And if we refuse," General Torvik demanded, though his voice lacked its usual conviction. Elena's expression remained serene. "Then the distortions continue. Your empire will remain intact, your people unharmed, but your ability to function as a cohesive civilization will erode. Time will flow differently in different sectors. Space will fold unpredictably. Reality itself will become unreliable." She paused, letting the implications sink in. "We don't want to do this. We're showing you a fraction of our capability as a deterrent, not a threat. Please, choose peace." The council chamber fell silent. Even General Torvik seemed subdued, The fight drained from his posture. High Chancellor Verethix looked around at his fellow council members, seeing defeat in their eyes. "We accept your terms," he said finally, each word seeming to physically pain him. "The Centauri Collective will withdraw all forces from disputed territories and enter into formal peace negotiations." Elena's hologram nodded. "Thank you, High Chancellor. The reality distortions will cease immediately. Our diplomatic teams await your representatives." As her image faded, the council members felt a subtle shift in the air. Whatever force had been affecting their perception of reality was gone, leaving them with only the memory of what they'd experienced. In the days that followed, Centauri forces throughout the galaxy reported that the strange phenomena had stopped. Ships could navigate normally, time flowed consistently, and reality remained stable. But the psychological impact lingered. The once proud Centauri military had been humbled not by superior firepower, but by the demonstration that humans could fundamentally alter the rules of existence itself. At an emergency session of the Solarian Council, representatives from across the galaxy gathered to hear humanity's explanation. Elena Martinez, now regarded with a mixture of respect and fear, addressed the assembly. "For years, we warned that you shouldn't make us mad," she began. "Many of you laughed, thinking it was a childish threat. But we weren't threatening. We were pleading. We developed these capabilities because our homeworld taught us that sometimes survival requires unthinkable adaptations." She gestured to the star map displaying the now peaceful border regions. "We could have used these powers to conquer, to dominate. Instead, we chose restraint. We chose to ask nicely, to say please, to warn rather than strike. Because we understand that true strength lies not in the ability to destroy, but in the wisdom to refrain from destruction." The chamber remained silent, the weight of her words settling over the assembled representatives. The age of human ridicule had ended. In its place came a new understanding, that humanity's politeness wasn't born of weakness, but of terrible knowledge of their own capabilities. As the session concluded, delegates from dozens of species approached the human contingent, eager to establish new diplomatic relations, trade agreements, and mutual defense pacts. The balance of power in the galaxy had shifted irrevocably, not through war, but through the demonstration that humans had transcended conventional warfare entirely. In the Centauri sector, military academies began teaching a new doctrine, the human protocol. It emphasized that when humans say please, when they ask nicely, when they warn against provocation, listen, because behind their politeness lies power beyond comprehension, held in check only by their own restraint. The galaxy had learned that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't their technology, but their choice not to use it unless absolutely necessary. And that choice, that restraint, made them more formidable than any conquering empire in history. The lesson learned. The aftermath of the Centauri crisis rippled across the galaxy like waves from a cosmic stone dropped into still water. Species that had once dismissed humanity as newcomers now scrambled to understand the true nature of human capabilities. In the great libraries of Arcturus Prime, scholars pored over Earth's history, searching for clues about how a species barely a century into interstellar travel had developed reality-altering technology. On Earth, President Marcus Okonkwo convened a special session of the United Earth Parliament. The holographic chamber connected representatives from every human colony, space station, and outpost across known space. "We stand at a crossroads," Okonkwo addressed the assembly. "Our actions have revealed capabilities we hoped never to use. Now we must decide how to proceed in a galaxy that views us with new eyes, some with respect, others with fear." Dr. Sarah Chen, attending as scientific advisor, added her perspective. The quantum reality manipulation technology was developed as an absolute last resort. Its continued existence poses ethical questions we can no longer avoid. Senator Jana Novak from Mars Colonial Authority stood. "With respect, Dr. Chen, that genie cannot be put back in the bottle. The galaxy knows what we can do. Our choice now is how to use this knowledge responsibly." The debate continued for days, broadcast openly to all human citizens. In the end, Earth's government made a historic decision. They would share the theoretical foundations of their technology with the Galactic Confederation, but maintain sole control over its application. At the next Solarian Council session, Ambassador Elena Martinez presented humanity's proposal. We offer transparency about our capabilities, but not the means to replicate them. In return, we propose the establishment of the Galactic Peace Initiative, a framework for conflict resolution that prioritizes diplomacy over force. The reaction was mixed. Some species welcomed the initiative, seeing it as a path to lasting peace. Others, particularly those with imperial ambitions, viewed it as humanity imposing its will on the galaxy. The Krath Empire's representative, a towering insectoid warrior diplomat, clicked his mandibles in agitation. You offer peace while holding a weapon to our heads. How is this different from tyranny? Elena met his compound eyes steadily. Because we're not demanding submission or tribute. We're asking for cooperation. The weapon, as you call it, remains sheathed unless absolutely necessary. We've demonstrated we prefer talking to fighting. And if we refuse your initiative, the Krath pressed. Then you continue as before, Elena replied. But know that any aggression against peaceful species will be met with appropriate response. We're not the galaxy's police force, but neither will we stand idle while others suffer what we have the power to prevent. The Galactic Peace Initiative passed with a narrow majority. Over the following months, its effects became apparent. Border disputes that had simmered for centuries found peaceful resolution. Trade flourished as species felt secure enough to lower their military spending. Research collaborations increased exponentially. But the most significant change was psychological. The phrase human diplomacy entered the galactic lexicon, referring to the practice of exhausting every peaceful option before considering force. Military academies across known space began teaching human history as a cautionary tale about the relationship between power and responsibility. On the Centauri homeworld, High Chancellor Verethix Prime resigned, replaced by Elder Counselor Merix, who had advocated for peace. The Centauri military underwent radical reform, shifting focus from expansion to defense and peacekeeping. Their academies now taught a course titled The Cost of Arrogance, Lessons from the Human Encounter. Former Admiral Torvik, stripped of rank but granted clemency, became an unlikely peace advocate. He traveled the Centauri colonies, speaking about his experience with human reality manipulation. I spent my career believing strength meant the ability to destroy your enemies, he would tell audiences. The humans taught me that true strength is the ability to make your enemies question why they fight at all. 6 months after the crisis, humanity revealed another surprise. They had been developing technology to repair the quantum damage caused by their reality manipulations. Dr. Chen led a team that traveled to affected regions, carefully mending tears in space-time and stabilizing areas where reality remained unstable. We created these wounds, she explained during a press conference. It's our responsibility to heal them. This act of cosmic environmental responsibility further shifted galactic opinion. Species that had feared human power now saw evidence of human conscience. The Syntherian Collective, known for their philosophical approach to technology, formally proposed that humanity be granted a permanent seat on the Galactic Ethics Committee. A year after the Centauri crisis, the first class graduated from the newly established Academy of Diplomatic Sciences on Luna. Students from over 50 species had studied together, learning negotiation, conflict resolution, and what became known as the human approach, exhaustive diplomacy backed by overwhelming but restrained force. Among the graduates was Thax, the former Centauri commander who had experienced reality distortions firsthand. During his valedictory address, he shared a revelation that resonated across the galaxy. The humans didn't just show us their power. They showed us their fear of it. They understood what they could become and chose a different path. That choice, that daily decision to be better than their capabilities require, is what truly makes them remarkable. The galaxy's perception of humanity continued to evolve. Religious movements sprang up on some worlds, viewing humans as enlightened beings who had transcended the cycle of violence. Others saw them as living reminders of technology's double-edged nature. But all agreed on one point. When humans said, "Please," it was wise to listen. In the depths of Psychomega, Dr. Chen and her team worked on their next project, finding ways to share defensive technologies without enabling offensive capabilities. "We can't keep the galaxy in check through fear forever," she explained to President Okonkwo during a briefing. "We need to build systems that make our intervention unnecessary." The president nodded thoughtfully. The goal was never to be the galaxy's guardians. It was to create conditions where guardians are needed. As the second anniversary of the crisis approached, the Solarian Council unanimously passed the Universal Peace Accord, based on principles outlined in humanity's initial proposal. The accord established clear protocols for conflict resolution, mutual defense agreements, and collaborative research initiatives. During the signing ceremony, representatives from the Centauri Collective formally apologized for their aggression. High Chancellor Mirix presented humanity with a crystalline sculpture depicting the moment reality warped in their council chamber, not as a reminder of defeat, but as acknowledgement of wisdom gained. "You showed us that power without wisdom is meaningless," Mirix declared, "and that true civilization is measured not by what we can do, but by what we choose not to do." Ambassador Martinez accepted the gift with grace. "We're all students in this vast universe. Sometimes the hardest lessons are the most valuable." The ceremony concluded with a moment that would be remembered for generations. Every representative stood and, in their own language, repeated the phrase that had once been a joke, "Please don't make us mad." But now it carried new meaning. It was a recognition that anger, that unrestrained use of power, diminished everyone. It was a commitment to patience, to dialogue, to finding better ways to resolve differences. In the years that followed, humanity's influence spread not through conquest, but through example. Species after species adopted variations of the human diplomatic model. Wars became increasingly rare as the galaxy internalized the lesson. True strength lies in restraint. Earth's quantum reality technology remained unique, its secrets closely guarded but its existence serving as a deterrent to aggression. No one wanted to test whether humans would use it again, and that uncertainty maintained peace more effectively than any treaty. Dr. Chen eventually retired from Psychomega, taking a position teaching ethics and advanced physics at the Terran Science Academy. In her inaugural lecture, she shared the philosophy that had guided humanity's development of reality-altering technology. "We didn't create these capabilities because we wanted to use them. We created them because we needed to survive. But in creating them, we faced a choice: become what we feared, or find a better way. We chose the harder path, the path of restraint, of responsibility, of saying please when we could demand." The galaxy had learned its lesson, taught not through destruction but through demonstration. Humanity's warning, "Please don't make us mad," became a universal principle of diplomatic relations. It represented the understanding that civilized beings should strive to resolve conflicts without pushing others to the extremes of their capabilities. As the decades passed, new generations grew up in a galaxy where humanity's restraint had become legendary. Children across countless worlds learned the story of how humans had said please and meant it, how they had warned before acting, how they had chosen peace despite possessing the power to enforce their will. And so the universe continued, wiser for its encounter with a species that had looked into the abyss of its own potential and decided that being kind was stronger than being cruel, that asking nicely was braver than demanding, and that true power lay not in what you could do, but in what you chose not to do. The stars still shone, civilization still grew and changed, and throughout it all, the lesson echoed across the cosmos. When someone says, "Please," especially when they don't have to, it's wise to listen. For behind that simple word might lie power beyond imagination, held in check by nothing more and nothing less than the desire to be better. The universe had learned, not too late after all, why humans kept saying, "Please don't make us mad." And in learning, it had grown a little kinder, a little wiser, and a lot more careful about dismissing politeness as weakness. For in the end, humanity's greatest achievement wasn't the mastery of quantum reality or the development of incomprehensible weapons. It was teaching the galaxy that the most powerful force in the universe isn't the ability to destroy, but the wisdom to refrain from destruction. And sometimes that wisdom speaks in the simplest words, please.